food insecurity is not a new issue in the UK. I think probably most of us realize that. It was really important to say that at the beginning. The cost of living crisis has made food insecurity a crisis, but it was already a problem. So before the cost of living crisis, churches were already responding and running food banks, running meals, running some sort of response long before. You might be wondering, when did the first food bank start in the UK? And I wonder if you had a guess, if you could guess, it was the year 2000, so just over 20 years ago was the first food bank. The main reasons now that people need food banks are quite similar to when 23 years ago, except they're slightly worse now, the problem. So the first reason is people are employed, but they have low wages. Secondly, they are applying for benefits and they've had delays to actually getting the money in. Third reason, family breakdown is a big reason that people need help with food. The cost of living crisis obviously made it worse. And then the last thing being people who are refugees and asylum seekers who have no access to money and public funds. Those are the main reasons that some of the big charities have told us. In 2021, Trussell Trust is the main food bank provider, and they fed 2.1 million people in the UK 2 years ago. That was 80% more than they fed 5 years before that. So I think that the crisis is quite clear for now, and the numbers are pretty stark. So just to say, as we start, we very much do not have an answer to this, and we haven't come to tell you that the future of food banks is any certain way. We just want to start the conversation. And I just wanted to share a couple of things as a diocese about food banks. So we feel there's such good things related to food banks. There's good benefits of them. They are a quick response to an emergency. They're fairly easy to set up and run, and they're providing a very immediate need, which is really important. There are some issues that sometimes people come across with running food banks, and probably some of you might have faced those. Sometimes it can mean that people can feel dependent on the food bank and struggle to be able to pay for their own food because the source of the problem, of the low wages, of the family breakdown, sometimes those things are chronic and not solved necessarily by a food bank. And sometimes food banks can slightly mask the reason that people don't have food. But we very much do not have the answer and feel food banks are really essential. So I'm going to introduce now our first speaker. And I'll just look for her on my page. Jackie, can you, yay, hello, Jackie. I'll just quickly, I'll let you introduce yourself, but I'll just say Jackie is running a food bank in North London at an amazing church called St. Mary's, Hornsey Rise. The vicar of the church is on the call today. Jackie is very successfully running the food bank. I have visited. It's really inspiring to see the work. So we would love to hear from you, Jackie. Now, I'll let you introduce and share a bit more.
Okay, so we're unmuted. Good afternoon, folks. So in about 2015, we at St. Mary's Church, I'm a member of the parishioner at St. Mary's, we were approached by 3 young professional people who have experience of the charity sector. They'd identified that North Islington was one area where there was acute poverty and a need. And they approached us and said, you know, can we partner with you and create a food bank here? And the PCC at St. Mary's said, you know, we had a few questions and how we were all going to organise it. And we said, yes, brilliant. That's just what we know. We know that people in the local community are in need. So we were happy to help. So the food bank operates on a referral basis. So clients can get a referral via GPs, via schools, local authority agencies, local charities, etc., etc. And when it started, the food bank operated on a fairly small scale. Every Wednesday evening from about 6 o'clock, volunteers would turn up. They would start sorting out parcels or donations that came in. The food bank opened at 6:30 for clients needing the food bank. At that stage, you'd have probably 15 to 20 households coming in. They'd come into the church, they'd sit down, they'd have a cup of coffee, they'd have a chat, they'd have a one-to-one chat with the volunteer, who would ask them, you know, do you want tea or coffee? Do you like baked beans? Do you like tinned tomatoes, etc., etc. And the volunteers would go and pack their bag full of ambient food, mainly tin food, and bring it to them. And the clients used to pack the bags, stay and chat to other food bank clients, have a biscuit, have another cup of tea, etc., etc. And that ticked on like that for some time. And then we had COVID. And then obviously you all know what happened in COVID. Nobody could go shopping. You couldn't go out. Supermarkets were only allowing you to buy 2 packets of pasta, etc., etc. I myself didn't, because I was working at the time full time, didn't have much dealings with the food bank other than just as a member of the church donating, you know, foodstuffs to it. So I, you know, reached out to Tamsin because she was tearing her hair out trying to get, how can we do? I said, let's do some, I can help you. We can go shopping and see if we can get supplies for the food bank, because none of the supermarkets were delivering and things like that. So this is how it was, you know. So then I got involved then. So the number of households obviously has been increasing slowly through the pandemic, and there were long queues of people waiting out in the outside, because at the time churches were shut. You couldn't have services. So we moved the food bank provision from a little room up in the tower down to the main space in the church. So the church was effectively taken over by food, because we were open for services. Any services that happened were streamed, and it was all online, and you weren't allowed in the building for any other purpose. So that's how we started. So also because local people saw this huge queue of people queuing around the block, coming to get food, people were saying to us, oh, there's a food bank here. How can we help? Can we donate some food? And we're at St Mary's thought, well, as the food bank was only open on a Wednesday evening, we needed to be open during the week so that people could drop off food. So we started opening our doors Monday to Friday from about 12 to 3, which is slowly extending. We're open now from Monday to Friday, 10 till 3, 10 till 4 every week. And it helps because we've now created a warm space. So people in our community who are vulnerable can just drop in, have a cup of coffee, etc., get to know us, get involved. We have more volunteers, that people that have used the food bank say, can I give back? Can I help? So we have people coming in who use the food bank or needed to use the food bank, but now come and volunteer and help with us. So obviously through COVID, you still had to have social distancing and things like that. So the volunteers would pre-pack parcels and hand them to clients, sometimes out on the street when we weren't allowed people in the building. And we also do deliveries to a few vulnerable people still in our local community. So we didn't think that we would still be existing on this scale coming in 2023, but then obviously we've had the cost of living crisis and the need for our food bank has grown. So grow from about 15 to 20 households in 2015 to now we serve probably about 100 up to 130 households each week. So we needed then to be able to get food from other sources, because clearly just relying on the general public for donations, you couldn't guarantee that you had food. So the Hive trustees managed to try to apply for lots of different grants to get funding so that they could buy food. We approached the Felix project to see whether they could take us on their books so that we could get surplus food. There's another marvellous little charity that was set up at the beginning of lockdown from a ladies' garage in Highgate called Foodbank Aid, which is now supporting 21 food banks across North London. In fact, yes, at the weekend, they had a 36-hour fundraising campaign, and they've raised in 36 hours over £1 million, which is brilliant, which means that they can carry on giving food to us and also supporting 21 food banks. And the worrying thing for them is they have a waiting list of food banks wanting to join that family. And another good thing with that is we have a little local WhatsApp group, and so food bank managers or food bank people that run them we have a little chat group, so we can work out various wrangles that people would have. So at one stage there was something called Nappygate, so everybody was coming in asking for bags of nappies because they have a street value. Everybody was coming in for other products that have a street value. And unfortunately, some people in our community are dependent on drugs, alcohol, or other issues. And if they could get things to sell things so that they could fund their habit, that happens. So a typical food bank week for us is on a Monday. We're normally very quiet. We do a bit of housekeeping, a bit of finance work, and a bit of tidying up and cleaning. Tuesday, which is today, we've got our main deliveries of food coming in. So we've already had one big food delivery in. We're waiting for another one from a charity called Banquet, which we should have about £2,000 worth of tin food coming in a minute. And then later in the afternoon, we'll get a delivery from Felix Project. Felix Project, you don't know what you're getting. It's all surplus food. Hopefully there's lots of nice fruit and vegetables so that we can, which would be brilliant for our clients. Wednesday, we have a busy day. So the volunteers start by, we've sorted out what fruit and veg we've got. They will then make up boxes of fruit and veg. So ideally, we've got a little fruit and veg box for every single household that needs to use the food bank. We have loose eggs coming in trays, so they'll bag up eggs. There's all sorts of things that need bagging up. We collect surplus bread and cakes from bakeries at the end of the evening, so they'll bag up them. And then later on in the afternoon, we start to pre-pack parcels, and the parcels are defined on the size of your household. So, and they are pre-packed. So the volunteers, when the food bank opens at 6:30, the food bank clients come in, they are registered, ticked off the list, go to a packing station, are given their donation of their ambient food, plus hopefully some fruit and veg, plus some bread, and plus whatever you know, fresh stuff that we may have had in the day before from Felix. You know, invariably it's things like yogurts, it can be chilled cooked meats, it can be fresh meats, it could be all sorts of things. And then they will pack the bag. And so we still have a queuing system, because we try and keep people so it's not too packed. So they come in, pack, we try and run it on a swift and easy basis. So that's sort of, and then on the Thursday, we tidy up, put away, do a bit of stock checking, work out what we need to order for the following week. And that's basically the operation of the food bank. As a church, we do other things. So during COVID, we had furloughed chefs. So we did a Friday night takeaway, where we cooked in our kitchen, and food bank clients and local community people came in and collected a freshly prepared cooked meal. Now we run a cooking class. So it's busy all week.
I mean, there's so much information, and we're really so grateful to you. I think people can tell your incredible commitment.
Yeah.
And that's coming through. In your last, we have about 2 more minutes for you. In your last 2 minutes, can you give advice that you'd give to other people? I can see in the chat, there's some people who are just very new to this. What advice you'd give to them as they just start?
I want to butt in on it, Jill, just in terms of just one little piece of information before the 3 women came and approached the church. Actually, before the food bank even started, we had looked at starting a food bank and felt that we didn't have the right people, and we had, as a church, prayed about it. Okay. And personally, I think everything comes by starting with prayer, and I just wanted to add that one little piece.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you, Tamsin.
So, people who want to start something, you don't need an expensive gym membership when you're shifting sacks of potatoes and trays of baked beans around. You keep yourself fit and active. I think you have to be patient, you have to be flexible. You may write a daily list of things that need to be done, but you may then end up only ticking off one thing because somebody's come in needing help, and you're there to help with them, whether or not it's just to make them a cup of tea and a chat, or sometimes they want prayer or whatever. You have to be completely flexible. It's hard work, but it's very rewarding.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Jackie. We so appreciate you coming on, and Tamsin, thank you so much for reminding us about praying before we do anything and during.
Questions to Jackie later, maybe.
Yeah, so we're going to have questions. There's quite a lot of questions, Jackie, that I think would be really helpful to be answered. We're not going to do that right now.
Okay, cool.
Yep. So towards the end, we've got them all typed up. So we'll ask you, and I think a few of them will be for you to answer. So thank you. I'll turn over now to our next speaker, so you can put yourself on mute, and I will introduce our next speaker is Bill Miller. Hi, Bill. And Bill will explain he's running a Foodcycle project. So that's a community meal, and it's at a church called St. Paul's, Marylebone. So it's in central London. So would you like to tell us a bit more, Bill?
I would indeed. Thank you, Jill. So I'm Bill Miller. I'm the Food and Wellbeing Project Manager of Foodcycle Marylebone. So Foodcycle, as Jill said, is based on a community meal model, and there are currently 16 projects across London, 14 of which are managed directly by Foodcycle, which is a national charity, so that's run all over the UK. But 2 projects, so there's a project in Lewisham and then the project in Marylebone, where I am. We run them ourselves, so we have a slightly different model. To only in that it's the direct management, so that's my responsibility and my role. Just to give you a bit of a background, so I'm based in an estates church in Dagenham. That's where I spend the rest of my time. I do my job in Marylebone part-time. But I just wanted to give you a background, a brief sort of overview of Foodcycle if you're unfamiliar with it. So their main aims are to connect communities, to support mental health, well-being, and reduce loneliness, to nourish the hungry, to promote sustainability, and to inspire change. So the idea behind I loved, Jackie, thank you very much. You helped me in thinking, how am I going to cover all of this? Because a lot of it does mirror. So like Jackie explained with the Foodbank, we are wholly reliant on surplus food. In our case, it comes from another charity called City Harvest London. And as Jackie said, you never know what you're going to get. So one week you could get 8 crates of food, the next week you could get 25. And from that, the difference for us is we're creating a 3-course vegetarian meal from what we receive on the day. And we're feeding anywhere between 35 to 55 people. That's post-pandemic. Prior to the pandemic, we were regularly feeding 80 to 90 people once a week. The community meals just once a week. We just wouldn't be able to sustain it. If you're involved at all in food poverty or food insecurity, there is, since the pandemic and the cost of living crisis, the sort of double whammy of the two, there's actually a great need. So the number of food poverty charities or organizations which are now needing supplies, food surplus, has increased dramatically. This is one of the things which many of us who've been involved with this for several years are finding out. So you have to be creative. So to give you an idea, the other week we had, in fact, last week we had 8 crates of food, most of which turned out to be snacks, drinks, and bread, all of which could go in our food surplus bags. But as far as for the meal itself, we ended up creating a meal from 4 crates of food, and 2 of which were fruit. So that dealt with the dessert. And the rest of it, thankfully, came because we do receive support from local businesses within central London. We're sponsored, or rather, we're one of the charities who benefits from a business partnership called the Baker Street Quarter Partnership. So various businesses twice a year will ask us what our supply needs are, and they will actually fundraise for us, which could be anything from a financial donation to a food drive. And we're able to be very specific in what we need. So thankfully, because we'd had one recently, we're well stocked. So most of the meal that was produced on Wednesday to feed the 3-course meal actually came from our existing food stocks. But I can tell you that they go down very quickly, as Jackie said, and you never know what you're going to get. So Foodcycle Marylebone has been going for about 6 years. Our project runs once a week on a Wednesday evening at 6 o'clock. People come in, they sit wherever they like. The tables are set up for 8 people around a table. And it's very much based on what might look like from an outsider on a family meal, just sitting around a table, having a meal together and chatting. Some people tend to sit at the same tables every week. Other people, they'll come sporadically. That may be because of their life situations, or we have a number of people who have caring responsibilities. And so people may change, or they may just change tables. But the best thing about the meal is the stories. People share stories, and they share openly, and they share honestly, and they share their struggles, but they also share the good things that are happening. So we hear everything from, I'm really struggling to pay my energy, to, oh, I've just had another great grandchild, to, I'm going on holiday, to, I've just been made homeless. So it's a variety of things we're faced with on a weekly basis. And part of our remit, because we are based in a church, is also trying to refer to other agencies as and when needed, and where we can support as much as possible. So it's a 3-course vegetarian meal. I've got a team of about 150 volunteers who rotate on a weekly basis. So we have a cooking team who prepares the food in the afternoon, and then we have a hosting team which serves it out in the evening. And everybody will leave, everybody who comes will go away with a food surplus bag, which will include bread from a local bakery, from Gale's Bakery, often includes cakes as well. And then, as Jackie said, very similar, we hope that we can provide some fresh fruit and veg as well. maybe some ambient food, and it just depends what we've got on the day. And then the other thing we'll try and do as well is our cooking team is very good, is they over cater on purpose. So they purposely make the meal almost for twice the capacity of what we can do. And they do that so that we've got enough takeaway boxes of food so that everybody goes away with at least one, but usually two. And what we find is that if somebody gets a starter and a main, that starter, which may be soup, that soup is great. And they'll also have received some bread in their food surplus bag. So that's one meal. But if they get a main, we find that often people will bulk that out, and that then becomes another 2 meals. So the idea behind it is they're fed on the night, but then they also go away with more meals, which they can then have for the rest of the week. And that's one of the positive outcomes of it. Jill asked me to sort of chat a little bit about, I previously worked for a Trussell Trust Foodbank in Liverpool. I was the assistant manager of South Liverpool Foodbank for several years. So I do have a background with understanding how Trussell Trust works. And I would agree that there is a difference between the two. What I would highlight is Trussell Trust food banks exist for an emergency. Really, it's to meet an emergency need. And this is obviously because of chaotic lifestyles, housing needs, benefit cuts. It could be any one of a number of things. I'll just give you one example. Where we were working, there was a factory. The owners of the factory, because of financial crisis, actually shut the entire factory, and there were 50 families who were made immediately unemployed with no redundancy payments because the company had gone bust. And so the food bank, along with 3 other charities, developed a support package very quickly to try and be able to support. So some of that was an immediate sort of box of food need, which was separate from what anybody who came to a Trussell Trust would normally get. We worked with an education charity to make sure that we could reskill people. Many of the workers were from Lithuania and Latvia, so English was not their first language. So getting them educated to speak the language, things like getting a driver's license and other things like that. And some of them became homeless. So it was working with a social housing provider as well to make sure that they weren't going to be made homeless. Many of them had families. So that's a way how it works. That's what we mean by emergency. Foodcycle is slightly different. I would say the main emphasis with Foodcycle is on social isolation. It's breaking down the barriers of social isolation. Most of the Foodcycle projects exist in or around estates or impoverished areas. So if you looked on Foodcycle's website and you picked out where all the projects were, you would, if you know London and you know the demographics of the areas, you would be able to understand why there's a project in, say, Waltham Forest or Bow Road, or say Islington or Kilburn or White City or Marylebone. Marylebone always seems odd because we've got all these businesses. We've got BNP Paribas, we've got a thriving station, we've got the Baker Street Partnership, we've got all these things, but all you need to do is turn around and look the other way, and we've got high-rise flats, most of which are social housing. And that's our community who we meet. So as far as that gives you hopefully a bit of a background, I would say I'm going to cut myself short because there's tons of questions I can see popping up. So I want to answer, and I'm sure Jackie does too. I don't think there's a right or wrong model. What I would agree with what Tamsin said. I think you need to work out what model works for you, your situation, your locality, your context, and see what's that. There are independent food banks, there are food pantries, there are food stores, there's Foodcycle, there are loads and loads of models. And I think my experience would say that you need to find the model that works for your situation, for your church, for your locality, for the community you're serving, and see what works there. Because much as there are these models and you can transfer them and try and sort of replicate them, they won't work the same because the model has been developed based on your own context. So though Foodcycle Marylebone follows the Foodcycle model, because we are a directly managed project, our project runs very differently than any of the other Foodcycle projects across the UK. And that is because we're directly managed. Also, although Foodcycle itself is not a faith-based charity, because our project is directly managed, we do very much bring faith very much to the forefront. And we started with West London Synagogue. So we have a lot of our volunteers are from the Jewish community, are people of faith. It's just, and so we have lots of faith conversations. Equally, we've got Orthodox Christians, we've got Coptic Christians, we've got Muslims. We have a lot of people who will come in during Ramadan to break the fast, and they'll pick up the takeaway meals because it's a nice way of benefiting our brothers and sisters who are fasting. So we have lots of conversations about faith, even though it's not the main focus. It does provide an avenue from which we can discuss things and move forward, and then food. So faith and food very much going hand in hand. And I think I'm going to stop there.
Thank you, Bill, so much. We really appreciate everything that you've said and your experience. Before we move, we do have lots of questions, so we're going to do a Q&A now. But first, Bill, the volunteer model that you're following is quite different in the way that people sign up and how that works. Could you just quickly say a bit about that?
Yes, so one of the benefits of going with Foodcycle is all our volunteers are run by Foodcycle. So our project, because we're directly managed, pays a fee to Foodcycle. And one of the things that means is we get a wonderful support package. So we get all the branded, the logo things. And one of the other things we get access to is the Foodcycle volunteer portal. So people can sign up to 6 weeks in advance. They can sign up for either the cooking team or the hosting team. And we don't need to worry about who's going to do that in that respect. But where I take over is I contact them to give them the details of where it is they're going to be doing that, what it is they need to bring with them, which is a positive attitude, get there on time, the normal things, and then just sort of make sure that everything runs smoothly on the day. So that's a slightly different, which is why I say I've got a large team. Most of our volunteers, although they sign up, are regular. So people who've been with Marylebone for anywhere between 3 and 6 years. They like the ethos, they like the way we run the project, and they very much want to be a part of it. So people try and sign up as much as that. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Bill. I think because it's a unique way of getting people to sign up and to volunteer, I thought it'd be great for you to explain that. We've got lots of questions, but the first question is so important that I thought I would ask it. And then those of you who have typed in your question, we have looked at them and they're really important questions. So after I ask Jackie the first question, can you unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question, or do the raising hand, which is down in the bottom. So the first question, Jackie, can you tell us, how do you sustain yourself? I think it's really stood out to people how much effort you're putting in and how much passion you have. How do you sustain yourself when you're giving out that much?
I think it's you have your faith and it keeps you going. And it's also you meet some marvelous people. You hear some heartbreaking stories and you hear fantastic things about people that that's what makes you go, because people are struggling and people can still share and give. And it's amazing how people can continue. I mean, there are, and also sometimes you go home and you have a large glass of wine. That helps as well sometimes.
We're all laughing because we understand. We know the importance. We're going to turn it open to questions, but Bill, do you want to say a minute or two on how do you sustain yourself?
I'm all for Jackie's method. Believe me, that there are days where and it's not because that's the answer, but sometimes it does help. I'm married to somebody who completely understands my passion, and I have to say that really helps. I've got somebody to talk to, because there are times where I come home from work and I'm venting. So I leave the house at 12 on a Wednesday and I don't get home till 10 at night on a Wednesday. So sometimes I'm walking the door at 10 and my wife will know exactly what kind of day I had by whether I go, hello, or Reza. She'll know exactly what kind of day I had. But you need to have somebody to talk to, definitely. I would say if you can get away from work at any point, go for a walk helps. And for me, when I'm on the job, I need to pray as I go along. I don't have time to sit and have a quiet time while I'm at work. It's so chaotic and it's so frenetic that sometimes just literally walking from one end of the building to the other and praying as you do that, I think that helps a lot as well.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Bill. Those of you who we've got really good questions in the chat, but would you like to unmute yourself and ask the questions?
Elizabeth was interesting. She was talking about Go Foodbank.
Okay, would Elizabeth like to start, or
she doesn't have to,
we can start with anyone?
Or you can ask it for her. She doesn't want to.
Which question did you want me to ask, or both of them? I just wanted to get some discussion on the idea about whether or not Foodbank should be open to everybody. We took a decision at Bow Foodbank at the beginning that we wouldn't require referrals. We do ask people their working status, but they don't have to answer. And we also ask how many in the family and that kind of thing, and collect the stats. But we don't require benefit to know whether they're on benefits or not. And I think that becomes part of the social aspect of the food bank, in the sense that the food bank should be part of social prescribing. Others have talked about, for example, we had a legal advisor in at one time, in which, she was as popular as the food, because a lot of the people, I don't know what others find, but a lot of the people who come to our food bank are intimidated by authority and forms, and they just haven't explored the possibilities of getting help of any kind because they're terrified. I think we always thought it was very important to be open to anybody, and that we thought that was in keeping with the church mission. And beyond that, when we had space and time before the lockdown, we actually used to set out the food like a supermarket, and they could go around and pick their own. And we haven't been able to do that since, for obvious reasons. But I know people are concerned about the prospect of no referrals, no status criteria, and yes, we do get scammed, but these people are in need. So, and we don't actually think the scamming is significant, that it's really damaging other people, which would be the key issue. So
thank you. That's a really important question. I wonder who has thoughts on that. Jackie or Bill, would you like to?
I think there are all kinds of people. We know of people that go around multiple food banks on different days of the week to collect food, parcels. Clearly, they have a need. Whatever their need is, they will need it. So nobody wants to walk into a food bank unless they are in need, and we're here really to help them. So it's a challenge. Like you, we have somebody that comes in during the week, and if people then have got the confidence and they want to talk to us and explain their problems, we have somebody that comes in, and it's a slow and quiet and process where they will sit down and help them apply for benefits that they may be entitled to but never thought of. For example, this is a silly example, but one of our volunteers that also uses the food bank, was saying, paying for her Oyster card, and I said, but you don't need to. You can apply for a freedom pass. There are lots of people like that, so we help them do that. We also have got free Wi-Fi here, so people can come in and sit and have a coffee during the week, use the Wi-Fi and chat to people, and we can find out more. it's difficult to balance, I think, but clearly people have needs, and they wouldn't come to the food bank if they didn't need to.
Thank you, Jackie. That's really important. Bill, did you have any thoughts on whether to gather information from?
So I was looking in the chat for Elizabeth's question so with the different, I suppose, so the difference with Foodcycle, partly why I like it, is Foodcycle is open to anyone and everyone. So we do have people who will, we do have weeks where we hand out food surplus bags, and we've head counted everybody we've clocked everybody who's come in. We've done the head count. We know how many bags we've got. We know how many extra bags we've got, and somehow we managed to run out. And that's because we've got a few people who do come for the meal who will have popped it into a shopping trolley or a rucksack or something else, so they're taking 2 or 3 home. And like you, we just go, it happens on occasion, and we'll just create extra bags as needed. It's, to be honest, it's one of the things I like about Foodcycle, because there isn't a referral system. It's not reliant on that. It's open to anybody. Although I've worked for Trussell Trust, I did like the model because there was, you had a lot of backup and a lot of support, but equally we worked a lot with the independent food banks as well, of which there's a big network in Liverpool. So we worked hand in hand with them, and we all agreed that there was a need. And although we were bound by our own constraints or our own models of how we'd set up, everybody agreed that actually that we were there to help people, and we would find any and every way to help people, regardless of whether that means bending the rules or not. That's my personal experience.
Although ours need a referral, often they will walk in and they haven't got a referral. They'll get an emergency parcel from us. We'll take their details down and ask them, for permission so that we can then pass their details on to somebody else. It could be another one of the local clergy. It could be an Islington thing called Help on Your Doorstep. There people have the time, because on a busy food bank day, you don't have the time to spend a lot of time chatting to people. And these other people then can work out, are there other issues that are troubling them that they need help with? And ideally they can then signpost them or help them with the other issues, be it housing, be it energy, be it whatever the issues are, they can help as well.
Great, thank you both. I wonder if we can move. Alice, are you able to ask your question? I
am, but I'm just gonna cheat a little bit and just add on to that whole discussion about what information you ask. It's just out of interest. We've just had an application as the Charity Commission to make our food bank a registered charity rejected on the basis that that we don't gather enough information about them. We can't prove that people are in poverty because we don't have enough information. So it's just to throw that into the mix, really, that I think the Charity Commission have got a bit stricter on that. But my question really is, when I came to St John's and there was a soup kitchen before COVID happened and it turned into this big food bank, my first Sunday I announced that I wanted to close down the soup kitchen, and there was this collective intake of breath. I thought, who is this weird mad vicar that we've just appointed? But of course, I don't want to run one. I don't want to run a food bank. I don't want to run a soup kitchen. I don't want them to be necessary. And I suppose the question is, how do we as churches work together? Seeing as we're all kind of very busy and just trying to meet people's immediate need and not really having the capacity always to get to the root causes of their food poverty, how do we work together to build a society where they're not necessary?
Who wants to respond? Bill, you're nodding. Do you want to take yourself off mute?
I would, except the church phone just rang, so sorry.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That may be also Tamsin, if Tamsin's still on the chat, she could help with that, because obviously we've wrestled with similar issues, and Tamsin's there now, maybe.
Yeah, the only thing is I don't know what the issue was, because there was a phone call and it was someone asking about help for someone who's in a refuge, so it took a bit longer, which is really rare because I'm in the vicarage and hardly anyone phones the vicarage number, and because we are in the office. But so what's the question?
Should Alice, do you want to say it quickly, or do you want me to?
How do we as churches work together to address the root causes of food poverty so that we can all close our food banks down?
God, that's a huge question. I think we need some people who work who are keen to work on that advocacy side of things, who aren't in the immediate operational side of things, because actually it requires a different response. Because in a way, I think as long as we have a system that keeps people in poverty in areas like this, we will always have and what I think we would probably want to work to do is reduce down how the food banks, the numbers that they're operating for, but I think some of the power of the things that we're doing is around community. I don't think you would want to get rid of those. So there's a bit about, I think I'd want work that helped to think through what should stop and what should continue. But you'd need some people who could help do that at a more strategic level.
Okay, Elizabeth, do you want to come back in? You've got your hand up.
Yeah, I'm speaking partly on behalf of Kevin McCulloch, who is on the call. Kevin is the community manager at the Royal Foundation of St Catherine, which those of you in the east part of London might be familiar with as a Christian charity retreat house. And he and my food bank are setting up a food poverty conference. The first point of that is to bring all food banks, or particularly church food banks, in our deanery together, because we're all reinventing the same wheels. So it's always been my sort of passion, is to get people working together. And the second purpose, which is in the long term more important, is to get together some kind of a campaigning message. Kevin is hoping to have our mayor there, certainly senior people from the council. And we just need to kind of bring together the issue, because we are in the most deprived borough in the country, and the issues of food poverty won't go away by having, no matter how many food banks we have. So I would commend the idea to others that if you can get together, you've got more critical mass and you've got more weight.
That's really, really helpful to hear, Elizabeth. We're in our final 5 minutes, and I wonder, could we take maybe one final question from someone?
We might to ask one off from the list. I don't know. I can't see anyone with their hands up. Do you want to just take one from the list and ask?
Yeah. What about could someone answer the question about what's the next stage that you feel? So once people have had the emergency need, they've had some help, what should happen after that?
Can you explain the Bill's Wi-Fi?
Yeah, we're really sorry. Bill has just dropped off the call because of Wi-Fi issues where he is, so he's not able to answer this. Is there someone that wants to? Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
I think one of the things I mentioned before is to work together with other agencies. There's a doctor in our deanery who persuaded the NHS of the concept of social prescribing, which is to look holistically at an individual's situation. Maybe they need everything from kind of group activities to serious legal advice. And we would ideally like to place under Foodbank in that context. But we do, as I said before, we do have the advice line, which is at least a start. But I really do feel strongly that Foodbanks should work with other agencies to genuinely help these people get themselves out of their difficulties.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. We appreciate your experience. We are coming to the end now. We haven't had a chance to answer all the questions, but I hope some of what you've heard has addressed some of them. Andrew in the chat was saying that the two people who've spoken today have represented very different responses to food insecurity, and that's right. And that was our purpose in asking them each to speak, because they both are responding to need and doing it very well, but doing it quite differently. And they do require very different resources. So the Foodcycle project allows local people to volunteer on a website and show up. So they're not necessarily church members volunteering. And that does solve one of the problems that often comes up with churches struggling to get enough volunteers. The other, I have visited with Jackie and with Tamsin to their project, and I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn, but you seem to have so many committed people at church. I think because of the way that you're leading the church, Tamsin. So you have lots of people who are helping out, and that's a different situation than is happening in some churches. So yes, those are very different models. I want to say a huge thank you to Jackie and to Bill. Bill, I think, is not on because of the Wi-Fi issues, but I'm going to thank him afterwards. And thank you to all of you.
Jackie's left to go to, because Morrison's have turned up.
Have they? Okay. Can you pass on our thanks to her? We really appreciate it. And thank you to all of you for giving us your time. We will be in touch after today.